food industry, it's easy to see how they are set up to benefit the corporations over the consumer. The regulators have created special terminology for packages, assuming that consumers would be able to guess what they mean. Any product containing the words dinner, nugget, or formula only have to contain 25% actual meat. Any product labeled with only has to contain 3% meat. Furthermore, the so-called flavor rule allows for any protein to be listed on the back. It may be flavored as meat, but in reality, a bag that contains the word flavor may contain little to no meat. By using the keyword flavor on the package, the pet food could, but does not have to contain any meat at all. But it's acceptable for the package to contain an image of a fresh steak. Ingredient panels do display protein percentages, but protein percentages do not represent actual meat content in the product, as protein can come from a multitude of sources. This raises the question if the average consumer knows that the terminology used on packages reveal the exact amounts of meats used in foods. Trying to understand who exactly makes these rules and what their actual legal authority is leads to many different organizations.
The Association of American Feed Control Officials is a non-governmental organization. They have a model bill that sets the standards in terms of ingredients, nutrient levels, package labeling in terms of ingredients as well, for pet food companies to abide by.
Each year, members of AFCO come together to update their official publication, which defines each ingredient that's allowed to go into pet food. Members of the major pet food companies attend the meetings as well, allowing their voice to be heard when it comes to what goes into pet foods. So, who is AFCO?
I think if you look at our websites, we have some very clear statements about the fact that AFCO is not a regulatory organization in itself. That's one thing important. The second is that AFCO doesn't approve products. What we do is we deal with the ingredients and the scientific validation, if you will, of the ingredients that go into the food. And then the actual claim that a manufacturer makes that it's AFCO approved is probably not representing what AFCO itself would say.
It's a gathering of sheriffs. They're there just to get agreement on the best level of nutrition that can be required.
FDA has worked closely with AFCO on the regulation of all animal feeds, not just pet food. I think the important thing to remember is FDA is a true regulatory authority, where AFCO is an association of state feed control officials. And as such, AFCO has no regulatory authority.
If you meet the nutrient level for protein, it makes no difference whether that protein comes from a healthy protein source like chicken or whether it comes from a base protein source like wheat flour or wheat gluten that's been fortified with protein of some kind. As long as you meet the nutrient levels that they've set, the food is approved as AFCO approved. When you look at the AFCO manual, I think you really begin to see how the interests of AFCO and the pet food industry align. Actually putting together a list of ingredients that you would want to see in pet foods, that you would want your pets to eat, and then forcing that on the industry. They've done it in reverse and basically just accepted the standards that the industry has been using for years.
And I'm quoting now, use of the term or claim natural on pet food labels. So if I want to use the word natural on my dog food label, here are the rules, and I am quoting this verbatim. A feed or ingredient derived solely from plant, animal, or mind sources, either in its unprocessed state or having been subject to physical processing, heat processing, rendering, purification, extraction, etc. It goes on, and essentially these are all definitions of the antithesis of natural. All consumers would assume that if their dog food said the word natural on it, that what's in it would not be a rendered product.
They're meeting the industry standards and the industry regulations that they've promulgated themselves. So it's a vicious circle of they create their own regulations, they meet their own regulations, and then they can claim that they're providing you organic and all-natural foods when in fact it doesn't meet what consumers believe those terms actually mean. But it does meet what the industry has defined them as.
The definition of the word and the use of the term organic must have 3% organic chicken and at least 67% other organic ingredients. Could contain non-organic chicken meal or non-organic chicken fat.
This is not an independent organization that is regulated by the FDA or USDA. This is not the government overseeing safe and adequate food sources for dogs and cats. This is a self-regulated industry setting their own requirements and then letting dog and cat food manufacturers know that if they're interested in having the food be labeled as nutritionally adequate, they need to adhere to their standards that they have put in place themselves. So the FDA's primary role is in regulation of what the label says is in there is actually in there. The FDA is not regulating quality, production, sourcing, any of those things. They're regulating that what you say is on the label is actually on the label.
The most shocking thing about the pet food industry that has remained since basically I started doing this work is the FDA compliance policies. I still cannot understand how an industry is provided by a federal tax-supported organization loopholes to avoid federal law. If you go to the FDA website and just type in compliance policies and then scroll down the page to animal feed, and there's one after another, they allow contamination by pesticides, contamination by industrial chemicals, contamination by natural toxins, contamination by filth, microbiological contamination, overtolerance, or unpermitted drug residues. It's incredible. The law says that can't be, but the compliance policy says, don't worry. Go ahead, we won't enforce the law.
The reforms that need to be done in the pet food industry are not done. There are some steps that I've seen. People seem to be interested. I've had a lot of FDA, you talk to the FDA and they're like, we really want to fix this. But the fact is, it's pet food. And who has the time? And who has the money, really? I mean, we've got bigger fish to fry right now.
For all practical purposes, there's nobody looking out for the average dog.
In 2006, a mystery illness began to sicken thousands of pets across the United States and Canada, thrusting the industry into the spotlight like never before.
Okay, everyone is so freaked out about this recall. Tell us, what do people need to know about this recall?
Well, so it's menu food.
Menu foods. Menu foods.
Menu foods.
Oh, menu foods.
On March 16, 2007, Many Foods began recalling dog foods produced in their facilities in Kansas and New Jersey.
What disturbs me about this incident is that it confirms yet again that pet food as well as human food is at risk.
More than 60 million packages were taken off store shelves last month because they apparently contained wheat gluten that was tainted with the chemical melamine.
When the recall was announced, nobody knew what the problem was.
Veterinary offices are getting flooded with phone calls from concerned pet owners. Did the people on the other end of the phone sound worried?
Yes, very worried, yes. No official estimates on exactly how many have died so far, but hundreds of pets have suffered.
My strong belief is that they were intentionally delaying.
The recall happened because they thought they were purchasing a certain protein product called wheat gluten that has actually a pretty high protein count, when in fact they were buying wheat flour that had been laced with cyanuric acid and melamine in order to pass it off as wheat gluten. The way they test protein sources is to do this, to check the level of hydrogen in it. And both cyanuric acid and melamine have high levels of hydrogen. So they just would inject the wheat flour with these poisons and then pass it off as wheat gluten. And the reason they were doing that is that wheat gluten costs a lot more per protein count per ton than wheat flour.
When the wheat gluten got into menu food system, it infiltrated all this other pet food.
That's when hundreds of pets got sick or died from eating the food made by Menu Foods. That company makes dog and cat food under 90 brand names.
In 2007, pet owners didn't have any idea that one manufacturer, Menu Foods, made hundreds of different varieties of food. That was a betrayal of trust to so many pet owners.
This is leading people to wonder at this point, what can we safely feed our pets?
Do we need more, I hate to say this, regulation of pet food, more inspection, or some way to get to the bottom of this?
Purina tonight is recalling a batch of its Purina One dog food.
A warning tonight to check the food you are feeding your pet. Many vets are reporting that they are seeing pets getting sick from recalled dog food. Food that should have been taken off store shelves months ago.